Hi everyone and welcome to Book Boop. My name is Rachel and welcome to another recent reads video. I'm going to talk about 5 different books that I have read recently. As always, let me know down below if you've read any of these books and your thoughts on them, but let's go ahead and jump in. So the first one I'm going to talk about is actually my first 5-star read of the year, hopefully first of many, and I'm really excited to talk about it. And that is Where the Drowned Girls Go by Shannon McGuire. This is the newest release in the Wayward Children series by Shannon McGuire. If you haven't heard about that before, it is currently a 7-book series. I think this is the 7th one. They're all novellas, and they are adult portal fantasy books. They feel very much like middle grade and young adult in a way because this story focuses on kids that have returned from magical worlds. So Alice that would go into Alice in Wonderland, the Pevensey kids would go to Narnia, that kind of situation. Kids that have gone into these different magical worlds and now have found themselves back in the regular world and having a hard time adjusting. And they end up going to a school with a bunch of other kids who have also had the same experiences and dealing with the fact that a lot of them feel like they belong in those other places and they don't belong here, and just adjusting back to the real world. I adore this series. It is so much fun. So many of them are honestly standalones. There's a few in the series that you could definitely read on their own without reading anything else in the series. This particular one does kind of continue from a few other books in the series, so you do have had to read a good chunk of the series to be able to read this one. But like I said, they're all novellas, so they're very, very short. I think they're all under 200 pages, so they're very, very short books, really fun reads. I adored this one. So in this story, we are following a girl from one of the previous stories, and she had gone to a world where she was a mermaid, and now she's obviously not a mermaid anymore, and she's back in the real world. And she's been going to I'm blanking out on the name of the school, but she's been going to the school for the School of Wayward Children, and she loves it there, but she's having a really hard time shaking some things that have happened recently in another magical world that kind of traumatized her a little bit. And so she decides she wants to transfer to the one other school that kind of deals with kids that have gone to different worlds. But this school is vastly different than the School for Wayward Children. School for Wayward Children is a very warm environment. It's where kids feel very safe and a safe place they can talk about the experiences they've had. This other school basically kind of hammers into your brain like it didn't really happen, you live here now, you need to basically purge any magic from your thoughts and your system, that kind of thing. And so she's thinking, okay, if I go to this other school, I think it will help me. And it's about her going to this other school and finding out some things about the school that are really dark, and it was so much fun. I love the characters in this series. I love getting to see the character growth. I love getting to learn about all these different kids who have gone to all these different magical worlds and what happened to them there. And it's just so fascinating and fun, and I love it. I feel like I can't talk about it too much more because I don't want to spoil anything, especially since this is the 7th book. But my goodness, I love this series so much. If you're looking for a fun, quick, Portal fantasy reads, just a fun series to binge, I highly recommend. It was a blast, and like I said, this was my first 5-star, so this is a 5-star in 2022. Loved it so much. Okay, let's talk about the next one. This is another one that I really ended up loving quite a bit, and I was really hoping I would, because this is usually a hit or miss author for me, and that is Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This is one of her more recent releases. I think it came out in late 2021, and it sounded like pure horror, which I was really pumped about. Usually Christina Henry does retellings, and this one is an original story, so I was really excited to read it. This story, we are following a woman who is living in a very isolated cabin in the woods with her husband. Her husband is extremely abusive and awful, and she is obviously struggling a lot being in this particular isolated situation. But then some strange things start happening in the surrounding woods to where they think there's some kind of monster in the woods, and it's about her kind of having to decide whether or not she would rather face the monster in her own home or the monster out in the woods. That's basically all I'm going to say about that. I will say, whole bunch of trigger warnings for this book. Like I said, her husband is very abusive. He's abusive physically and also verbally. It's hard to read sometimes, to be hearing what this woman's gone through and how long she's dealt with this. There's a lot more to her story that develops. Her character has a lot of the development, which I really love. I think it was my favorite part of the story, was seeing her go from this very meek, frightened person and her finding her courage and her strength. And I loved that. I loved seeing that in her character and the amount of things she had to push through. This book is very much horror. It is terrifying. It is horrific with how horrible people can be, and also just there being like this terrifying monster in the woods. It kind of made me think of like a Bigfoot type situation. It's not Bigfoot, but it's just kind of that kind of creature, but just really dangerous and violent. And it is intense. There's a lot of mystery to it as well. So I feel like it was almost like a mystery thriller horror, and I had a really great time with it. This book is also not that long, so it's very fast paced and you can read through it really quickly. I read through it really fast and I enjoyed it a lot. I think I gave it, what did I give it? Oh yeah, I gave it 4.5 stars, so almost 5 stars. I really enjoyed it a lot. It is definitely not for the faint of heart. Again, if you're worried about any trigger warnings, I would look them up. Just a lot of really difficult, abusive situations to read through. So it was hard at some points, but man, this book was awesome and I loved it. So great job, Christina Henry. I'll look out for the next thing she writes. Hopefully I love the next one too, because sometimes I don't like her books at all and sometimes I love them. But that one was a lot of fun. Okay, the next one is a continuation of a series. I've been working through the Keeper of the Lost City series by Shannon Messenger. It is a middle grade kind of massive fantasy series that I have been wanting to read for so long, and I read the second book in the series called Exile, and I am still really enjoying this series a lot. If you haven't heard about it before, it's about a girl who has the ability to hear people's thoughts. She's also very, very smart. She's always felt very, very just out of place until she finds out that she's actually not human at all. She's an elf, and she ends up being kind of thrown into this whole other different world that she didn't know about and has to go to a magic school and all those things. You find out about that, like that's in the description of the first book, so I promise I'm not spoiling anything by saying that. But it definitely gives me so many like nostalgic Harry Potter vibes. So if you are wanting to jump into a series that kind of gives you that Harry Potter feel, not a copy. This doesn't feel like it is copying Harry Potter. It just gives me that similar vibe, that kind of like a little bit of a chosen one trope, kind of the vibe of being thrown into this magical world that you didn't know existed, going to a magic school, dealing with school and friends and kind of like the normal kid stuff, but then also this character is dealing with a lot of other things, kind of like over the top of her head type things and conspiracies and all that kind of stuff that she's somehow involved with. And it's so fascinating, and these stories, they get pretty intense and heavy, and I love that. I love that they're very magical and whimsical. I mean, as you can see, there is a Pegasus, or a Pegacorn, because it's the unicorn, but then also the wings. So it's got like these magical creatures in it that seem kind of campy in a way, but there's so much interesting plot development and character development in these stories, and I just love it. This went in such an interesting direction in the story. I feel like I can't say what happens because I don't want to spoil anything, but I am just fascinated by how intricate the world is, how intricate the plot is. I love that the fact that even though these books are thick, they're like 500 something pages, like they are thick boys, but they read really fast, chapters fly by, the stories are really fast paced. I love the characters, they're so fun. There's lots of fun moments and funny moments. There's lots of really heavy moments. There's lots of character development. Like, I just love this series so far, and I'm only on the second book. I'm planning on reading hopefully one book a month in the series, because currently there's 8 books out, and I think there's supposed to be 10 eventually, so there's a lot of books that I need to get through for this. But if these continue to be this good, my goodness, this is so fun. I gave this one also 4.5 out of 5 stars, so another great one. I've had a really great reading time lately. This book was so good, so I highly recommend this series, especially if you want something that kind of gives you the Harry Potter vibes. Like, sometimes you wish you could just like, erase Harry Potter from your brain and like read it again for the first time, if you kind of have that feel like you want to be able to read a world like that for the first time, Keeper of the Lost Cities is my recommendation. I think it's so much fun. Okay, I've got 2 more books to talk about. This next one I adored. It was lovely, and it is The Boy, the Bird, and the Coffin Maker by Matilda Woods. I'm sorry if that is such a bright cover with the bright light, so I apologize if you're having trouble seeing that. But I loved this. This is a standalone middle grade, and it was so stinking heartwarming and sad at the same time. So in this particular story, we were following this older gentleman who is the coffin maker in his town, and he has lost his family, his wife, and his kids due to an illness years and years ago. So he just lives by himself, kind of isolated outside of the village. He lives near the cemetery, he kind of takes care of the cemetery, and he also is the one that builds coffins. And he's just living this very lonely life until a little boy who is homeless ends up kind of becoming this man's friend, and they have this close, wonderful bond that is just so stinking precious. And I love seeing this like older gentleman and this little boy just needing each other and kind of becoming their own family, and it is so precious. I loved it so much. The writing was wonderful, the story was really wonderful. It's a very, very quick read, and it was just beautiful. I loved it. It does pack a punch, like at the beginning, like in the first chapter, it slapped me with like heaviness. I was not prepared for it. Especially, it's amazing sometimes in middle grade, you read something, I'm like, wow, this is kind of intense. But it was just like, it was sad, but it was so heartwarming, and I don't know. I want to talk about the plot so much more, but I can't because I don't want to spoil anything at all. But it's just precious. If you want a nice, heartwarming middle grade read, I highly recommend. It is precious and wonderful. The illustrations in this book are beautiful. I loved it. It's so precious and pretty, and it's just beautifully written, and I highly recommend it. I gave this one also 4.5 out of 5 stars. Woo! So many good books. All right. Okay. After saying so many good books, I have one more to talk about. This one was a stinker for me. It was a 2-star, and I'm very sad about it because I wanted to love it so much. I wanted to read it for so long, and I even bought a physical copy of it, and I didn't like it. And that is Alice by Heart by Stephen Sater. So I wanted to read this one in February because Heart made me think February. Alice in Wonderland, for some reason, I connect in my mind with February. Maybe it's because there's so many heart-related things, Queen of Hearts and all that kind of stuff. I love Alice in Wonderland. It is honestly probably my favorite children's classic. I've read it several times. I have several copies of Alice in Wonderland. I love collecting different beautiful copies of it. I love Alice in Wonderland. This sounded so fascinating to me. So this book takes place in World War II. And we are following a girl and a boy who have been best friends, and they are currently holed up in the London Underground to avoid bombing. And the little boy is very, very sick and is not doing well. And this girl and boy have bonded over the years over the story of Alice in Wonderland. It's their absolute favorite story. They basically have it memorized, which is called Alice by Heart because she knows the story by heart. And they used to act out the story together. They'd play the different characters, and it was their favorite thing to do together. So in this book, she is reciting Alice in Wonderland by heart to her friend to comfort him and to comfort each other. And that sounded so fascinating to me. Just the blend. It was supposed to kind of be like this weird blend between Alice in Wonderland and also World War II. And this is also based off of a stage play. I think it's actually a musical, believe it or not. I haven't seen the musical or anything. I don't know really anything about the musical, but this just sounded so cool. It just sounded like historical fiction crossed with Alice in Wonderland. How fun can it get? And I struggled with this one. So if you have read Alice in Wonderland before, the writing style is very nonsensical, and that's the only thing I can think to say. It's nonsensical. This book was written in that style. So it was trying to mirror the style of how Alice in Wonderland is written, which is fine, great, I get it, But this book is also a lot longer than Alice in Wonderland. And if you're reading a book this long, how many pages was it? Hold on. Hold up. This book was, let me get to the last page, 267 pages of nonsensical writing. It was a lot. I didn't know what was going on half the time. I felt like the dialogue was constantly being talked in circles. Everything was in like rhyme or weird, I don't know. It was just, oh, I'm having trouble thinking of words to explain this because it was just the most nonsensical writing style, which at first I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's written like Alice in Wonderland, but it just kept going and it was just, it felt like I was reading in circles and I was having a really hard time meshing with this writing style and getting involved, like engrossed in the story. I was having a really hard time connecting to the characters because we're introduced to different characters who they're characters in the London Underground, but they're also supposed to like represent different characters from Alice in Wonderland, and it was just so strange. Because this is also a play, I kind of tried to visualize it in my head of happening on a stage. And I could see myself, if I were to see this play, I could see myself being very confused. It was just so nonsensical, strange, so hard to follow. And I got to the end of it and I was like, wow, that was a lot of my time for reading something that I really did not understand. And I'm so sad about it. And I wish I could describe my feelings on it a lot more than that. I feel like I'm not being very articulate and I apologize, but this one was just such a big miss for me. And I feel like if this story had been written in a shorter form, if the story had just been condensed more, I feel like it would have been more enjoyable. I think it was just way too long, written way too much in a nonsensical style that it was really hard to track and understand. And half the time I was just sort of like reading it but not really knowing what I just read and was like, whatever, it's fine, I'll just keep going, because I just wanted to get to the end of the book. I bought it and I wanted to read the whole thing, even though so many times I thought about DNFing it because I just was struggling so much. So I ended up giving this 2 out of 5. I think I'm gonna get rid of it. Originally I thought about still keeping it because I like the cover and I like the spine. I was like, oh, that'll be pretty to put with my Alice in Wonderland books, but it just makes me sad when I look at it because it was so disappointing. And I think I'm gonna take it to my local bookstore and get some credit for it, and maybe somebody else will pick it up and love it, because I could see somebody really loving this, but it just was too nonsensical / kind of poetic that I just couldn't jive with this really at all, and I'm really sad about it. So that's kind of a sad way to end this video, but most of the books that I read recently I have really loved. I got a 5-star, 3 different 4.5 stars. I've been having a great reading year so far, but then I'll have like a stinker like this. This is so disappointing. I'm so sad. Oh, it makes me sad. Okay, anyways, let me know down below if you have read any of these. Let me know, have you had a 5-star read yet this year in 2022? If you have, please let me know down below what it is. I would love to hear that. That'd be so fun, because maybe it can be a nice little suggestion for me to try out and see if it can be another 5-star read for me too. But on this side of the video is my logo. If you click on that, you can subscribe to my channel, follow me on my book journey. On this side of the video over here is a suggestion for another video if you would like to watch another one right now. But thank you so much for watching. You rock, and don't forget to keep reading. Bye!